Hey everyone, by the end of this tutorial, you will know how to automate all those mundane, annoying tasks that you currently still have to do by hand. So maybe you came over from Zapier, or you're just looking to optimize your time and the use of your time and get back to actually working on your business and doing the tasks in your business that you love and why you maybe started the business. And so you came across Integromat, and you really don't have to be a tech savvy person to use Integromat and to follow this tutorial. So you don't have to have a computer science background like me, but you can just follow along, and hopefully this will get you started on the road to automating all those annoying things in your business and getting back to all the things you love in your business. So let's get right into it. So let's get started with the basics. And the first question you're probably asking yourself is, what plan should I subscribe to with Integromat? Is the free plan enough, or do you need to pay for this? And the short answer to this, in my opinion, is if you're just getting started, just go with the free plan. It's enough to get a grip on it, and it's enough to actually start using it productively. So what are the main differences here? And the main differences are in the number of operations. So in Integromat, when you build an automation, so an automation is basically a string of different actions that automatically runs. Let's call that an automation in Integromat. These are called scenarios. So a scenario is one automation, or if you're coming from Zapier, a scenario is basically a zap. And each of these scenarios has a number of different modules in it, and the module does a specific action. So this action could be send out an email to this person, or upload this document to your Google Drive, or something like that. And each time one of these modules is running, so each time an action basically is executing, that is counted as an operation. Then you also have differences in the data transfer. So this is only going to be interesting for you if you're planning to really transfer tons of images or PDF documents or anything like that. So you really have to push around a lot of data and move around a lot of data. You might have to look at this in detail. And then the last big difference is the minimum interval the automation or the scenario can run. And just a bit of background on this, the way scenarios in Integromat run is you can either trigger them by time. So you can say, okay, every 5 minutes, execute this automation, execute this scenario. So these actions are taken, or you can say, trigger it with a specific other action. So for example, someone signed up through a form to your newsletter, and every time someone signs up, you want this automation to run. So this can be interesting if you're trying to run the automation, let's say once a minute, because then the free plan might not be enough. So what's the big difference, and why is the free plan probably enough for the very beginning and not later? And that is, in my opinion, the number of scenarios you can have actively running at the same time. You can build as many scenarios as you want, but in the beginning, you can only have 2 scenarios being alive. So they are looking for their triggers and they are ready to execute with the free plan. And from the basic plan, you can just have as many scenarios running live as you want. So let's now jump over to Integromat and get started building our first automation. So if you log into Integromat, here on the left side, you can click on scenarios. And then if you are in your scenarios, here on the top right, you can create a new scenario. So that's what we're going to do. Then it's going to ask us to put in or to select which service we want to connect. So this is an extensive list of literally hundreds of different services we can connect. And we are now going to build a simple customer service use case here. So this might not be an actual use case you might want to use in real life, but it's just more to illustrate some of the cool things you can do in Integromat. And what we want to do is, if someone sends us an email, so someone sends us a customer request or customer service email address, we then want to register that in, for example, a Google Sheet. So we have a Google Sheet where we track all the requests and the status maybe. And then we also want to send a message to our Slack channel, so our support team gets pinged, so they don't have to always check the emails, but they know if in our company, for example, in this fictional example, we have a Slack channel, everything kind of goes through Slack. So we can just ping people in Slack and no service request gets lost. What are the things we want to do? First of all, we need to add the first module. Let's say in our company, we're using Microsoft 365 email. And what we want to do is we want to watch messages. So we want to watch the incoming messages. Then first of all, you might have to set up a connection. To do that, you just click on add, give it a name so you can find it later, and then go to continue. And then it's going to ask you to put in the login information for your Microsoft account. In this case, it just pulled what I put in earlier. And then you can select what you want to do. So we want to watch all messages. You can specify only certain folders. You can search for specific names. So let's say in this case, it's just fictional. You say, okay, service request. And you can say how many emails do you want to fetch. You can probably leave this somewhere around 100 or lower than that, because it's going to be triggered by time. And then you can say, when do you want to start with this? So you can either say from now on, so all the previous emails are getting ignored, or you can say from a specific date or all of them. And we're just going to say from now on, because we're not interested in all the emails that came previously. Now we've put in the email module here. And now if we want to add another module, you can either hover over the first module and then kind of go on the right edge here. And then you can add another module, and then it's automatically going to connect them together. Or what you can also do is you can just search down here. And let's say we want to add, we want to track this in Google Sheets. So we add the Google Sheets modules, and then we want to add a row. Select that. So you can either drag the connections between the two, or if you just move it close enough, it's going to create the connection for you. And then we can select the Google Sheet connection we want. We can select the spreadsheet we want to add this to. So let's say we're adding it to the demo spreadsheet. And now let's say to the just fictional to an order sheet here. And then you can select which inputs go where. So for example, the name of the person, their email address, their headline, or maybe what the email is about, etc. What this workflow, what this scenario is now going to do, it's going to be triggered with every email we get to the specific email account. And then it's going to add a row to a Google Sheet that we have specified, so we can track all the incoming service emails or the service requests. And you can see on the left here, the very first module inside the scenario has this little clock here. And this clock says, when is the scenario going to be triggered? So there's two different types of trigger. One is the instant trigger. This is triggered by things like someone made a form submission through an online form, someone signed up for your newsletter, things like that. So specific actions that happen that you can then use to trigger this scenario, or you can have it time trigger. This time trigger can work in different ways. One is you can just say every X minutes, please execute the scenario. For example, every 15 minutes, execute the scenario. If you want to go lower than 15 minutes, you will have to have a paid account here. Or you can also just specifically schedule it for certain times and for specific days. So let's say we only want to ping our Slack channel on weekdays. So we don't want to bother our people on the weekend. We just say every week during the day, we want to run this automation, and for whatever reason, we only want it to run once a day at 10 o'clock. Please fetch all the emails that came in and then trigger our team. That's one way to do it, that you just set it to specific days. In our case, let's just have it run every 15 minutes, all days of the week. We want to run this automation. So that's how you work with the triggers. Now to another really powerful, really great feature, and that is filters in Integromat. So as you can see, there's this nice connection between our email module and the Google Sheets module. And if you click on this connection, it allows you to give it a label. Let's say we call it filter internal emails. And what we want to do now is anyone can send an email to our service email address or our support email address. And maybe sometimes also internal people in our team are going to send emails to that email address, and we don't want to log these emails. So what we can do is we can say, okay, each of the incoming messages, please check the email address it came from. So the sender email address we have here, you see here on the right is all the data that we pulled from the email. So this is everything we can use in Integromat to then work with it in a sense. You can see some meta information, when was the email sent, etc. What's the subject of the email, and all that gets pulled in automatically in here. And then you can just use that information simply by clicking on it, and then it's going to be copied in here. So in our case, we don't want internal emails. So we say that the sender of the email is not equal to, does not contain this, is it? At formorrow.com. So this in our case would mean no one from an internal email from our team will get through here. If someone sends an email from my team to this automation, then this one would make sure that it's filtered out, because the only packages that get through this filter do not contain at formorrow.com. Now, one important information here, as you've noticed, there is similar sounding filters you can use. For example, equal to is up here with the text operators. It's up down here with the Boolean as well. And there's also for the numeric, there's an equal to. So this depends on what kind of data you're putting or you're comparing or you're checking for here. There's some data, there's arrays, there's numbers, there's text, there's Boolean, so true or false. And depending on what type of data you're checking here against or you want to compare against, you have to use the right method here. So in our case, it does not contain from the text operators, but it could also be equal to, let's say, every time this one parameter is equal to 5, you want to do a certain action or you want to filter out the input data, then you have to select the numbers operator where it is here, numbers operator equal to, and then you would put in 5. So in our case, we want to check that this input does not contain @formorrow.com, so we can filter out all the internal emails. And one great thing here is that we can combine multiple filter rules into one filter. So the way this looks like is that when we click on the filter, we can then down here select add and rule or add or rule. So we can use and or rules. And if you add an and rule, then all of these, both of these rules have to apply in order for a data package to go through, or you can select an or rule, and then either of these two have to be true. In this case, let's say the sender of the email, we want to exclude everyone from our internal team, except for maybe me. I'm allowed to send emails to this email address and then they get through and get logged. This would be one way to say, okay, either the email address does not contain @formorrow.com, so no one of our internal team, or it's just dominic@formorrow.com. That's the only email that is going to get through this filter. So you can combine filters together into larger filter rule sets by using and or operators here. Let's now continue building our automation scenario here. So we said we want to notify our Slack channel whenever someone sends a service request. We add the create a message Slack module because we want to send a message to our support channel in Slack. So then let's say the name of the channel would be support. And for the text, let's say, hey, we've got a new support request from, and then we just drag in the email or the sender email address. So this is who we got the new support request from, and that is just going to be sent to our Slack channel. So this is how we can set that up. What we now have is a simple Integromat automation scenario that will notify our support team Slack channel every time that we get a support email. So let's say our support team is not working 24/7. So on the weekends, they might have some time off. So on the weekends, we don't actually want to ping their cell phones because maybe they have their Slack app installed on their cell phones, but we just want to send an email to another email address. For example, there's one email address that one particular person checks on the weekend to make sure no important support requests get missed. So what we want to do is we want to send an email on the weekend. So we have to sort of split up the logic of the flow here. We have to split up the flow. And the way we do that is by using routers. So to add a router, there's multiple ways we can do that. So we can either just drag in the module we want to connect. So let's just any module here, and then we can just connect it to the module we want to connect it to, and then Integromat will automatically add a router. Another way we can do this is if we have the flow here, we right click on the flow, and then you can say add a router, and then it's going to add a router to the flow. And then we just select the module we want to add. So in this case, we want to create and send a message on the weekends. We just drag that in here, connect it to the router. And what the router is now doing is it sends the same information to both or all of the connected modules. So in this case, it's going to send the same information up to the Slack module as well as down to the Microsoft 365 email module. Up in here, we have the same information available as we have down here in this module. We have the exact same inputs we can work with. But now we actually want to distinguish between a weekday and the weekend, because during the weekday, we want to send a Slack message. On the weekend, just send an email, but we don't want to do both actions. And we can do this by using filters. So we've previously used a filter in the beginning of the scenario to filter out all internal email addresses to our support email. And now we want to filter out specific days of the week. So we get the Slack message during the week. And let's first give it a good name. So let's check if it is a weekday. So this is what we're checking for. And then we have to build a condition. And now we're getting into a really interesting area of Integromat, and that is using the Integromat functions. In this tab, we've so far only looked at the different data points we can use, so the different information channel through the scenario. And now if you click on the further right tabs, you have different functions at your disposal. So you have general functions, for example, to check if an input is empty or not. You have math functions to, for example, sum up values. And then you also have text functions to work with different texts, and also date and time functions. And that's what we're going to use here. For this, we can use one of the variables we always have at our disposal, which is the now variable. And the now variable is the exact timestamp of the moment that this is executed. So it's down to the year, month, day, the day of the week, the hour, and the seconds, and actually down to milliseconds of the moment that this is executed. So if we use the now variable, we can always find out what is the current time down to the millisecond that this is happening. And in this case, we want to make sure that the current day is a weekday. So the way we do this is we use the now variable, which is going to tell us also what day it is, but we need to format the right way, because the now variable in this case is going to be a really long number because it includes the year, the month, etc. And we just need the day of the week. And for this, we can use the format date function that you can see down here. And for the functions, if you just hover over the function here, you can on the one hand side see some examples of how to use it, and some different examples, and usually also some references to the documentation. So let's pop this back up, and you can see here in the examples that first we put in the date time, so the timestamp, and this is the way it usually looks. So this is what the now function is going to return, which is quite cryptic, but we actually then in the end want to just have the days from here. And you can see back here that there's basically a code you have to use to tell Integromat what is the exact formatting that you want this to be in. And the code we use here is so-called tokens. So how do tokens work? If we just pop up the help over here, let's go to help and tutorials, and now just type in tokens. Then you will get a list of all the tokens we have at our disposal. And how this works is you just give this token to the format date function, and then it's going to output the information or the date time you put in this specific format. So if you would give this, the format date function, this token y, then it would put out just the year. And in our case, we want the day of the week. So we just give it 3 lowercase d's, which is, so we put this in here. First, we give it the now variable, which is the current date time. And then we say, please output it as just the day of the week. And now we want to check that this day of the week is a weekday. And the way we can do that is we just say, okay, is it, for example, a Monday? So we want to check, okay, is the current day of the week, is it equal to Monday? Or, so we add an or rule. It could be that the day of the week, let's just copy paste that the day of the week is equal to Tuesday. That's one way to do it. Now a quick tip here. So we can now do this for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, etc. But that's 5 different rules we have to add, and we are lazy. So we're actually going to flip it. We're not going to check, is today a weekday? And if it's a weekday, continue. We're going to check, is today a weekend? And if it's a weekend, don't continue. But if it's not a weekend, which means it's a weekday, we continue. The way this would look like is we say is not equal to, and then we say Saturday, and same thing down here, add an and rule, and then we paste in this and we say is not equal to Sunday. So basically now we're checking, is today Saturday or is today Sunday? And if none of that is true, continue. So if it's not a weekend, meaning it's a weekday, we continue on this route. And this is basically the lazy option to do this, so you don't have to put in 5 different rules, but you can just put in 2 rules. So now up here we have filtered, is it a weekday? And on a weekday, send the Slack message. Now we have to add the same thing down here for the email. So we go down here, give it a good name, is weekend. And then we just build the inverse of what we just built up there. So we copy paste that in here. So we format the date of today into the day. And now we want to check, okay, is today Saturday? then continue, or is today Sunday, then continue on this, because on the weekends we want to send an email, not the Slack message. So just to make the difference clear, down here we say, is it equal to Saturday or Sunday? So is it equal to Saturday or Sunday? And up here we say, is it not equal to Saturday, and is it not equal to Sunday? So up here we execute on a weekday, down here on the weekend. So this is how we can nicely automate the notifications if we get support requests. Now let's say in our tracking for the support requests, we want to add some functionality, because we don't just want to log the support requests. So let's say this is what the tracking looks like. In here is we just track the email of the person we got the request from, we track the message they sent, and we track the date and time we received it. But let's say we want to collect summaries as well. So we want to know, okay, which email address sent us how many support requests in total, just to sort of analyze our users' behavior and support behavior. What we need to do for that is we need to kind of break up our flow or our automation a bit. So we need to add more modules in here. And the first thing is, if we want to use this as a counter, so if we now wanted, if someone has sent 2 support requests, we want to have a number 2 in here, we have to first find the right row to update. So for this, we use the Google Sheets search row module, here search rows, and just drag that in here. So if you want to add a new module somewhere inside the flow, either click on the flow itself, not left click, but with a right click, you can add a module, or you, as I just did, you just drop it in and drag it to the right position. And Integromat is quite smart in figuring out that you just want to add it in here. So let's first give it a good name, and let's say search clients row, because we want to fetch the row. And let's modify this. So we want to use this connection. Let's select the spreadsheet. We want to use the support request tracking spreadsheet, and we want to go into the summary tab. So this is down here in the summary tab. And now we just make sure that we don't need all the whole column range. We don't need to read all the information. And now if we want to fetch the correct row from the Google Sheet, we have to make sure that we filter down to the row. So the number of requests is not unique, but the email is always going to be unique for each of our support requests. So we put in the email, and we say the email has to be equal to the email address we got in the beginning. So we want to know down here the email address, so we can find the row in here that corresponds to the person that sent us a support request, assuming that they already sent one before. And now if you want to actually test, so if you're building an Integromat scenario, you can see that quite quickly it can get quite big, and you might not want to build the whole thing first and then click run and see all the different things that break. So if you want to run it, you can run it once down here on the left, but you might want to test the specific modules that they are set up individually. And the way you can do that is you just right click on the module and you click run this module only, so you can test it. And in our case, then it just asks you for the necessary input. In our case, just put in an email address. It's going to run just this module. And we can see that this was the input we gave in, and the output is that it actually found the row. It is test@mail.com, and it is the second row in here. So let's see, first, second row, that's correct. And it has the number of requests the person has made. Let's just quickly change one thing here, and that is the formatting. I'm not happy with that. Yeah, so now we don't have any decimal points here. Let's just try that again. Always verify that everything is as you expect it to be. And yep, now we can see that there's no decimals here. So this is how we fetch the row. Now we have to update it. So we want to increase this number here, and we increase it by using the update a row module from Google Sheets. Drag it in here again. Let's just clean that up a bit. And one quick tip just to make your scenarios a bit nicer. So if your scenario is all messed up, so let's say everything is just all over the place, nothing's nicely arranged, you got one nice magic button down here. It doesn't impact the functionality in any way, but you have the autoline button here, which is all going to make it nice and tidy. So now let's update the row in our Google Sheet. First, let's rename it, update service request counter. So we always know what this module does. Here we go. And now we just set all the information we need. First of all, we select the connection again. Then we select the spreadsheet. and then we select the correct sheet in here. And now we have to tell it which row to update. So Google Sheets doesn't just know which one, magically know which one we want to update. And as we know from the previous one, we get the row number as a return if we search for the row. So the search rows modules, and again, if you just want to know where the input is coming from, here on the right in the variables section, hover over it and you can see that the search clients row module is blinking, and we want to know the row number. So this is the number of the row we are going to update, and now we can put in the information we want to update. So we want to keep the email address as it is, and we actually want to update, we want to count the number of requests up. So what we need for this is we need some math functions, very basic math functions. So we're just using the sum function, and again, just hover over it, and it's going to tell you that you just put in an array of values, and these values are basically just separated by semicolons. So you just put in the numbers you want to add. So we have the number of requests, which is the current number of requests, and then we just increase that by 1 since we got now 1 more request. So let's set that, let's click OK. So we give it the necessary input, run this module once, and then we need to put in the number of requests. So this is the information it would have fetched from the spreadsheet. So since we want to update the second row, the number of requests is 2, and we want to update the second row. Let's run that. Okay. Let's jump over and we can see, okay, it incremented it to 3. So now the new number of total requests is 3. So that's all set up and running. And to wrap it up, I want to have a quick look at some of the functions for strings that we have not had a look at yet. So the string functions is something you will probably work with, especially if you're working with human input. So form submissions and stuff like that, because humans make mistakes and do weird input things. So let's say in this case, we, just as an example to kind of showcase some of the stuff that's possible, here on the right side where the big A is, you have your text functions. And let's just say someone puts in, we don't know how they put the subject. So it could just be in all caps. Let's say their support request email was please help ! And we just, for whatever reason, we want to format that to actually be nicely capitalized, or maybe it's for a name. So it's actually please help like this. And, or maybe they just put in the name in all caps for whatever reason, where it's just John Doe like this, and we just want to make it a nice capitalized name, John Doe, not John Dunn. So what you can do is we can use either the capitalize function, which is just going to capitalize the first letter in the string we're giving it, or we can use the start case function, which is actually going to capitalize each of the words, as you can see here. In this case, if we want to actually clean up, for example, the subject, we just use the start case function, put in the subject from our input variables. The subject is right here, and now it's going to always capitalize the first name of the string it just gave to it. And there's a number of other text functions you can use. Just make sure to have a look at that, because that's always really useful and handy when you're trying to clean up the input that people are actually typing in by hand. So this is it for now. When I put this together, I wanted to make sure that I really cover all the basics like filters and routers, so you have all the tools to really start building your own automations and to be able to get rid of all those annoying and tedious tasks and to take that off your plate, so you can actually go back to focusing on why you started your business. Maybe you're a solopreneur, maybe you're a small entrepreneur or a company owner, and you want to make sure that you can actually focus on the main thing in your business and you're not bogged down by these annoying tasks that might take away the joy and the time from why you actually started out in the beginning. So I hope this was helpful to you. If you want some more tips, I've also put together a cheat sheet to help you hit the ground running. And my mission is to help you focus more on why you started your business, what you love about your business, and to actually stop spending all the time doing the manual small tasks like scheduling meetings, doing all the follow-up work, and doing all these annoying little things. So that's why we are here with Tomorrow. So check out the link to the cheat sheet below. And also please let me know if there's any specific topics or Integromat questions you would like tutorials on, so I can create that content for you as well and help you out there. My name is Dominik Lehnert. Take care and goodbye.